The clock on the wall showed 6:15 when Rosa pushed through the back door of the Golden Terrace restaurant. Her feet already ached from standing 8 hours at her day job, but she forced a smile as she walked toward the staff room. This was her life now. 2 jobs, 6 days a week, and barely enough sleep to keep her eyes open. She had been working at this upscale Manhattan restaurant for almost 2 years. The pay was decent, the tips were better, and most importantly, it helped her keep a promise she had made to her mother before she passed away. Rosa was 32 years old, but some nights she felt twice that age. She had dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide, and her hands were rough from carrying heavy trays night after night. But there was something about her that made people look twice. Maybe it was the way she carried herself, straight-backed and dignified, even when customers treated her like she was invisible. Or maybe it was the quiet intelligence in her eyes that seemed out of place in a waitress uniform. Tonight was going to be a long one. The restaurant was hosting a private event for some of the city's wealthiest investors and business owners. These gatherings always meant bigger tips, but they also meant dealing with people who thought their money gave them the right to treat others poorly. Rosa changed into her uniform quickly. The black dress and white apron were simple but elegant, just like everything else at the Golden Terrace. She checked herself in the mirror, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, and took a deep breath. "You ready for tonight?" asked her coworker, a young man named Tommy who had only been working there for 3 months. Rosa nodded. "Ready as I'll ever be." "I heard Vincent Caldwell is coming," Tommy said, lowering his voice like he was sharing a secret. "You know, the real estate guy. They say he's worth billions." Rosa knew the name. Everyone in the business world knew the name. Vincent Caldwell was famous for 2 things: his massive fortune and his terrible temper. Stories about how he treated waiters, drivers, and assistants floated around like urban legends. Some people said he once made a hotel manager cry in front of a full lobby. Others claimed he had gotten a flight attendant fired because she brought him the wrong drink. "Just stay out of his way if you can," Rosa said quietly. "Serve quickly. Smile politely. And don't make eye contact for too long." Tommy laughed nervously. "You make it sound like we're dealing with a wild animal." "Some of these people are worse than wild animals," Rosa replied. "At least animals don't humiliate you for fun." The restaurant began filling up around 7. Women in designer dresses and men in tailored suits filed in through the front entrance, greeting each other with air kisses and firm handshakes. Champagne flowed freely, and the sound of polite laughter echoed off the high ceilings. Rosa moved between tables like a ghost, refilling glasses and clearing plates without being noticed. That was the goal, really. The best servers were the ones you never remembered. They appeared when you needed them and disappeared when you didn't. But Rosa was more than just a server. What nobody at this restaurant knew, what nobody at these fancy parties could ever guess, was that Rosa had graduated at the top of her class from one of the best universities in the country. She had a degree in international business. She spoke 4 languages fluently, and until 3 years ago, she had worked as a financial analyst at one of the most respected consulting firms in New York City. Life has a way of changing plans, though. When her mother got sick, Rosa had to make a choice. Her younger brother, Daniel, was in his 2nd year of medical school. The tuition was enormous, and their mother's medical bills were piling up faster than they could count. Someone had to step up. Someone had to sacrifice. Rosa left her promising career without a second thought. She took a lower-paying job that gave her flexible hours, and she started working nights at the restaurant to make up the difference. Every extra dollar went to her brother's education or her mother's treatment. Her mother passed away 8 months later. But by then, Rosa had made a promise. She would see Daniel through medical school no matter what. He was going to be a doctor. He was going to save lives, and she was going to make sure nothing stood in his way. So here she was, 2 years later, still carrying trays and forcing smiles. Only 2 more semesters until Daniel graduated. Just a little longer, she told herself every night. Just hold on a little longer. Around 8 o'clock, the main guest arrived. Vincent Caldwell walked into the restaurant like he owned the place. And truthfully, Rosa thought, he probably could buy it 10 times over without checking his bank account. He was in his late 50s, with silver hair slicked back and a suit that probably cost more than Rosa made in 3 months. His face wore the expression of a man who had never been told no in his entire life. Behind him came a small crowd of people, laughing at jokes he hadn't even made yet, agreeing with opinions he hadn't expressed. They were the kind of people who attached themselves to power and wealth like barnacles on a ship. Rosa had seen their type many times before. The manager rushed over to greet Vincent personally. Hands were shaken, compliments were exchanged, and the VIP section was prepared with extra attention. Fresh flowers were placed on the table. The finest wine was brought up from the cellar. Everything had to be perfect. Then the manager turned and looked directly at Rosa. "Rosa, you'll be serving the VIP section tonight," he said. It wasn't a request. Rosa felt her stomach tighten, but she kept her face calm. Of course, she had been specifically requested for VIP service before. She was reliable, quick, and she never made mistakes. That was why the manager trusted her with the most important guests. But tonight, looking at Vincent Caldwell settling into his seat like a king on a throne, she wished someone else had been chosen. Still, a job was a job. And the tips from that table would help pay for Daniel's textbooks next semester. Rosa straightened her apron, picked up her notepad, and walked toward the VIP section. She had no idea that the next few hours would change her life forever. She had no idea that the man sitting at that table would try to break her in front of everyone. And she certainly had no idea that she held a secret that could bring him to his knees. All she knew, in that moment, was that she had to get through another night. One table at a time. One smile at a time. One deep breath at a time. She approached the VIP section, and Vincent Caldwell looked up at her with cold, calculating eyes. He didn't see a person standing in front of him. He saw a servant. A nobody. Someone beneath his notice. He had already decided she was nothing, and that would turn out to be the biggest mistake he ever made. The trouble started almost immediately. Rosa approached the VIP table with her notepad ready and her most professional smile in place. She had served hundreds of difficult customers before. She could handle one more. "Good evening," she said politely. "Welcome to the Golden Terrace. May I start you off with something to drink?" Vincent Caldwell didn't even look at her. He was busy talking to the man next to him, something about a property deal in Miami. Rosa stood there patiently, waiting for a pause in the conversation. 30 seconds passed. Then a minute. The other guests at the table glanced at her awkwardly, but nobody said anything. Finally, Vincent waved his hand in her direction without turning his head. "Wine. The expensive one. And make sure it's properly chilled this time. The last place I went to served it warm, like bathwater." "Of course, sir," Rosa said. "Would you prefer the—" "I said the expensive one." He cut her off. "Do I need to spell it out for you? Just bring me something that costs more than your monthly rent." A few people at the table chuckled nervously. Rosa felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she kept her composure. She had dealt with rude customers before. This was nothing new. She returned a few minutes later with a bottle of their finest wine, a vintage that cost over $800. She presented it to Vincent properly, showing him the label, waiting for his approval. He barely glanced at it. Fine. Pour it already. I don't have all night." Rosa opened the bottle carefully and poured a small amount into his glass for tasting, just as she had been trained to do. Vincent picked up the glass, swirled it once, and took a sip. Then he made a face like he had just bitten into something rotten. "This is what you call your finest wine?" he said loudly. "It tastes like vinegar mixed with regret. Take it back and bring me something drinkable." Rosa knew there was nothing wrong with the wine. It was perfect. The temperature was correct. The vintage was excellent. And any real wine expert would have appreciated it. But she also knew that arguing with a man like Vincent Caldwell was pointless. "I apologize, sir. I'll bring you another selection." Right away, she took the bottle back to the bar, feeling the eyes of other staff members on her. Tommy caught her eye from across the room and gave her a sympathetic look. Rosa just shook her head slightly. Not worth it, she told herself. Just get through the night. She returned with a different bottle, equally expensive, equally perfect. This time, Vincent accepted it with a grunt that might have been approval. Rosa filled glasses for everyone at the table and stepped back, ready to take their food orders. The ordering process was another exercise in patience. Vincent changed his mind 3 times. First wanting the steak, then the lobster, then back to the steak again. Each time he changed, he acted as if Rosa was somehow responsible for his indecision. "Why are you just standing there?" he snapped at one point. "Go put in the orders we've already decided on. Or do you need me to walk you to the kitchen myself? Go put in the orders." "I was just waiting to make sure everyone had finished ordering, sir." "Well, clearly everyone hasn't finished because I'm still talking. Learn to read the room, sweetheart." That word, sweetheart, delivered with such condescension, made Rosa's jaw tighten. She hated when customers called her that. It wasn't affection. It was a way of making her feel small, of reminding her that in their eyes, she was nobody worth respecting. But she swallowed her pride like she always did. "Of course, sir. Take your time." The meal continued, and so did Vincent's behavior. He snapped his fingers to get her attention instead of using her name, or even saying, "Excuse me." He complained that his water glass was too full, then complained when she filled it less that it was too empty. He sent back his appetizer because the garnish was touching the main portion, whatever that meant. The other guests at his table seemed uncomfortable, but none of them said anything. Rosa noticed a woman in a blue dress, looking at her with something like sympathy in her eyes, but the woman quickly looked away when Vincent started talking again. That was how it worked with people like him. His money created a force field around his behavior. Nobody wanted to risk their business relationships by calling him out. Around 9:30, Rosa was serving the main courses. She moved around the table carefully, placing each plate exactly as she had been trained. Everything was going smoothly until she reached Vincent's seat. As she leaned in to set down his steak, someone at the table made a joke, and the man next to Vincent suddenly leaned back in his chair, laughing loudly. His movement pushed his chair directly into Rosa's path. She stumbled slightly, and her elbow brushed against Vincent's shoulder. It was the smallest touch, barely a graze. Under normal circumstances, it would have been forgotten in seconds, but Vincent Caldwell was not interested in normal circumstances. He threw down his napkin and stood up so abruptly that his chair scraped loudly against the floor. The sound cut through the noise of the restaurant like a knife. Conversations at nearby tables stopped. Heads turned. Suddenly, everyone was watching. "Are you kidding me right now?" Vincent's voice was loud enough to carry across the entire room. "Did you just bump into me?" Rosa's heart was pounding, but she kept her voice steady. "I apologize, sir. Someone's chair moved and I lost my balance for a moment. It won't happen again. It won't happen again," he repeated mockingly, his voice dripping with contempt. "You know, I come to establishments like this expecting a certain level of professionalism. Instead, I get some clumsy girl who can't even walk straight." Rosa said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence was often the safest response. But Vincent wasn't finished. He was enjoying himself now. He had an audience, and he was going to put on a show. "Tell me something," he said, raising his voice even louder so that everyone in the restaurant could hear. "Does this place have any hiring standards at all? Or do they just pull people off the street and hand them an apron?" A few nervous laughs came from his table, though most people just looked uncomfortable. Rosa felt dozens of eyes on her. Some were curious. Some were pitying. A few seemed almost excited, like they were watching a car crash in slow motion. "I asked you a question," Vincent pressed. "What exactly qualifies you to work at a fine dining restaurant? Because from what I've seen tonight..." "The answer is nothing." Rosa took a breath. "Stay calm," she told herself. "Don't give him what he wants. I apologize for any inconvenience, Mr. Caldwell. I assure you it was an accident." "An accident?" he scoffed. "That's what people say when they're not good enough to do something right on purpose." He turned to address the room, spreading his arms wide like a performer on stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, let this be a lesson. This is what happens when you lower your standards. You end up with incompetent staff who can't perform the simplest tasks. He turned back to Rosa, his eyes cold and cruel. Tell me, dear, did you even finish high school? Or was that too challenging for someone of your capabilities? The room was completely silent now. Every single person was watching. Rosa could feel her face burning. She could feel years of frustration and exhaustion pressing against her chest, begging to be released. This man knew nothing about her. He didn't know about her degree, her career, her sacrifices. He didn't know about the nights she stayed up crying after her mother died, or the extra shifts she worked so her brother could follow his dreams. He saw a waitress, and he decided that was all she was, all she would ever be. He stood there with that smug smile on his face, waiting for her to crumble. Waiting for tears, an apology, or a humiliated retreat to the kitchen. But something inside Rosa shifted. Something that had been held down for a very long time suddenly refused to stay silent anymore. She set down her serving tray slowly and straightened her back, and she looked Vincent Caldwell directly in the eyes. The silence in the restaurant was so thick you could almost touch it. Every guest, every server, every person in that room was watching Rosa and Vincent. Some had forks frozen halfway to their mouths. Others had turned completely around in their seats. Even the soft background music seemed to fade away, as if the entire building was holding its breath. Vincent stood there with his chest puffed out, clearly enjoying the attention. He had asked Rosa if she had even finished high school, and now he was waiting for her to fall apart. Men like him lived for moments like this. They fed on the embarrassment of others. It made them feel powerful, important, alive. But Rosa didn't fall apart. Instead, she did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She calmly set her serving tray down on a nearby stand. She straightened her apron with steady hands, and then she looked up at Vincent Caldwell with an expression that was completely unreadable. "Mr. Caldwell," she said. Her voice was quiet but clear, and it carried across the silent room without effort. "I understand you have questions about my qualifications." Vincent raised an eyebrow, amused. He clearly thought she was about to apologize or beg for forgiveness. "Oh, this should be good," he said to his table, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Go ahead, sweetheart, enlighten us." Rosa nodded slowly, as if she was carefully choosing her next words. And she was. Because what she was about to say would change everything. "I do recognize you, Mr. Caldwell," she began. "It took me a moment to place your face, but now I remember exactly where I've seen you before." Something flickered in Vincent's eyes. Just for a second. A tiny crack in his confidence. "Is that so?" he said. But his voice was slightly less certain than before. "Yes," Rosa continued. "It was about 3 years ago. You submitted a bid to acquire a consulting firm called Whitmore Partners. Do you remember that?" The change in Vincent's expression was immediate. His smug smile faltered. His eyebrows pulled together. For the first time all evening, he looked caught off guard. "What are you talking about?" he said. But his voice had lost its mocking edge. Rosa took a small step forward. Not aggressive, not threatening, just enough to show that she wasn't backing down. "Whitmore Partners," she repeated. It was a mid-sized consulting firm based here in New York. You wanted to buy it because of their government contracts and their client list. Your offer was substantial, nearly $200 million. You were confident the deal would go through. The room was still silent, but now the quality of the silence had changed. People were leaning forward in their seats. This wasn't what anyone had expected. Vincent's face had gone slightly pale. "How do you know about that?" "Because I was there, Mr. Caldwell." Rosa's voice remained calm and steady. "I was part of the analysis team that reviewed your proposal. I was one of the people responsible for examining your company's financial records, your projections, and your valuation models." A murmur rippled through the room. People exchanged confused glances. The woman in the blue dress at Vincent's table was staring at Rosa with wide eyes. "That's ridiculous," Vincent said, but his voice had gone up half an octave. You're a waitress. I am a waitress. Rosa agreed. Now. But 3 years ago, I was a financial analyst with a degree from Columbia University. I specialized in corporate valuations and acquisition strategy, and I was very, very good at my job. She paused to let that sink in. Your bid for Whitmore Partners failed, Mr. Caldwell. Do you remember why? To Whitmore. Vincent said nothing. His jaw was tight, and his hands had curled into fists at his sides. Rosa continued. It failed because your valuation was wrong. You underestimated the company's worth by nearly $40 million. Your projections didn't account for their pending contracts with 3 major government agencies, and your financial models had critical errors in the growth assumptions. She tilted her head slightly. I know this because I'm the one who found those errors. I wrote the report that recommended rejecting your offer. My analysis was the reason the board decided to look for other buyers. The murmur in the room grew louder. Several people at nearby tables were now openly whispering to each other. At Vincent's own table, his companions looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. Vincent's face had gone from pale to red. A vein was starting to pulse on his forehead. This is absurd, he sputtered. You expect me to believe that you, some waitress, had anything to do with— I'm not finished, Mr. Caldwell. Rosa's voice cut through his protest like a blade. It wasn't loud, but there was an authority in it that made him stop mid-sentence. When your bid for Whitmore Partners fell through, you tried to recover by pursuing another acquisition, a shipping company with contracts in the Asian markets. You were so determined to close that deal that you rushed the due diligence process. You made assumptions based on incomplete information. And 6 months later, that acquisition collapsed too. The Shanghai port deal, isn't that right? Now Vincent looked like he had been punched in the stomach. The Shanghai deal was legendary in business circles, but not in a good way. It had cost him hundreds of millions of dollars and had nearly destroyed his reputation. He had spent years trying to bury that failure, to make people forget it ever happened. And now a waitress was bringing it up in front of 50 of the city's most influential people. That failure, Rosa said quietly, can be traced back to the same problem. Rushing. Arrogance. Assuming that you were the smartest person in the room and that everyone else was beneath your notice. She let that statement hang in the air for a moment. So, to answer your question, Mr. Caldwell. Yes. I did finish high school. I also finished college. At the top of my class, I've analyzed deals worth more money than most people will ever see in their lifetimes. I've worked with some of the sharpest minds in corporate finance. And I've watched men like you make the same mistake over and over again. Rosa's eyes never left his face. You look at people and you see what you want to see. You see a waitress, and you assume she's nothing. You see a uniform, and you think you know everything about the person wearing it, but you don't. You don't know anything, and that blind spot, that arrogance, is exactly why your deals keep falling apart. The room was completely frozen. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even the kitchen staff had gathered near the doorway, watching in disbelief. Vincent opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For perhaps the first time in decades, he had absolutely no idea what to say. His face cycled through several emotions: shock, anger, humiliation, and something that might have been fear. Rosa reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out something small, a business card. She had kept one from her old career, tucked away like a memento of a different life. She held it out toward Vincent. This is my card, she said simply. From my previous position. In case you ever need a proper financial review. I'd hate to see you make another $40 million mistake. Vincent stared at the card like it was a snake about to bite him. He didn't take it. Rosa placed it gently on the table in front of him. Then she picked up her serving tray, smoothed her apron, and looked around the room with quiet dignity. I apologize for the interruption to your evening, she said to the other guests. If anyone needs anything, please don't hesitate to ask. And with that, she turned and walked back toward the kitchen, her head held high, leaving Vincent Caldwell standing alone in the middle of the restaurant. Behind her, the silence finally broke. And it broke with something Vincent Caldwell had never expected to hear: applause. The applause started at a table near the back of the restaurant. Just one person clapping at first, slow and deliberate. Then another person joined in. Then another. Within seconds, the sound had spread across the entire room like a wave. Rosa froze mid-step. She hadn't expected this. She had expected to be fired. She had expected angry looks from management and whispered complaints from customers. She had braced herself for consequences, for punishment, for the loss of a job she desperately needed. But applause? That wasn't part of any scenario she had imagined. She turned slowly and looked back at the dining room. People were actually standing up from their tables. Men in expensive suits and women in designer dresses were on their feet, clapping for her. Some were smiling. A few were even laughing, not at her, but at the absurdity of what they had just witnessed. And in the middle of it all stood Vincent Caldwell, looking like a man whose entire world had just collapsed around him. His face was a deep shade of red that bordered on purple. His hands were shaking at his sides. He looked around the room desperately, searching for allies, for support, for someone who would take his side. But everyone was looking at him the way people look at something unpleasant they've stepped in. For a man who had spent his entire life being feared and respected, this was worse than any financial loss. This was public humiliation on a scale he had never experienced, and he had no idea how to handle it. "This is ridiculous," he finally managed to say, but his voice came out weak and strained. "You people are actually applauding a waitress who just insulted a customer? What kind of establishment is this?" Nobody answered him. The applause continued. Vincent grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair and started pushing his way toward the exit. His entourage scrambled to follow him, though Rosa noticed that several of them were keeping their distance now. They weren't walking beside him like loyal followers anymore. They were trailing behind him like embarrassed strangers who happened to be going the same direction. As Vincent passed Rosa on his way out, he stopped for just a moment. Their eyes met. Rosa expected to see anger in his gaze, maybe even threats, but what she saw instead was something she hadn't anticipated: fear. He was afraid of her. This powerful billionaire who had spent the evening trying to make her feel worthless was now looking at her like she was the dangerous one. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but no words came out. Then he shook his head sharply and stormed toward the door, disappearing into the night without looking back. The room erupted into excited chatter the moment he was gone. Rosa stood there, still holding her serving tray, feeling like she had just woken up from a strange dream. Had that really just happened? Had she really just stood up to one of the most powerful men in the city and watched him flee in shame? Before she could fully process what had occurred, people started approaching her. The first was an older gentleman with kind eyes and silver hair. He pressed a business card into her hand and said, "That was the most impressive thing I've seen in 20 years of attending these events. If you ever want to return to finance, give me a call." Then came a woman in a red dress who owned a chain of boutique hotels. "I don't know what your situation is," she said, "but I could use someone with your backbone on my executive team. Think about it." One after another, guests came up to Rosa. Some just wanted to shake her hand. Others had questions about her background, her education, her career plans. A few offered jobs on the spot, without even asking for a resume. Rosa accepted each business card graciously, thanking everyone for their kindness. But inside, her mind was spinning. Just an hour ago, she had been invisible. Just another server in a black uniform. Now suddenly everyone wanted to know her name. The woman in the blue dress from Vincent's table was one of the last to approach. She had hung back, waiting for the crowd to thin. And now she walked toward Rosa with a look of deep respect on her face. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. Rosa shook her head. "You don't owe me anything." "Yes, I do," the woman insisted. "I sat there and watched him treat you terribly, and I didn't say a word. I was too worried about my business relationship with him to speak up. That was cowardly, and I'm ashamed of myself." Rosa studied the woman's face. The regret there seemed genuine. It's not easy to stand up to someone like him, Rosa said gently. I understand, the woman smiled sadly. Well, you made it look easy. And I don't think I'll be doing business with Vincent Caldwell anymore. After tonight, I don't think many people will. She reached into her purse and pulled out a card. My name is Helen Park. I'm the CEO of Whitmore Partners. Rosa's eyes went wide. Whitmore Partners? That's the company you helped save from Vincent's takeover, Helen finished. I wasn't the CEO back then, but I was on the board. I remember the analysis report that exposed the flaws in his offer. I never knew who wrote it until tonight. Rosa didn't know what to say. She had spent 3 years wondering if the work she did at that consulting firm had ever mattered to anyone. Now she was standing face to face with proof that it had. Your report saved our company, Helen continued. If Vincent had acquired us, he would have stripped us down and sold off the pieces. Hundreds of people would have lost their jobs. But because of your analysis, we found a better path. We stayed independent. We grew. She pressed her card firmly into Rosa's hand. I've been looking for someone to lead our new strategic planning division. Someone smart, thorough, and brave enough to speak truth to power. After what I saw tonight, I can't imagine anyone better for the job. Rosa looked down at the card in her hand. It felt heavier than it should, like it carried the weight of a whole new future. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Helen smiled warmly. Say you'll think about it. That's all I ask. After Helen walked away, Rosa finally allowed herself a moment to breathe. She found a quiet corner near the service station and leaned against the wall, her heart still racing from everything that had happened. Tommy appeared beside her, his eyes wide with amazement. That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen, he whispered. You just destroyed that guy. Like, completely destroyed him. People are going to be talking about this for years. Rosa laughed softly, though it came out a little shaky. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I just couldn't take it anymore. Are you kidding? You were amazing. Tommy shook his head in disbelief. I had no idea you were some kind of secret genius business person. Why are you working here? It was a fair question. Rosa looked around the restaurant. At the tables she had served for 2 years. At the kitchen where she had spent countless hours carrying heavy trays and forcing smiles. Because life doesn't always go according to plan, she said quietly. Sometimes you have to put your own dreams on hold for the people you love. Who's he there? There's not maybe are getting bio. Readily reading bio. Tommy nodded slowly, even though he probably didn't fully understand. Well, it sounds like you might not have to hold on much longer. I saw how many business cards people gave you. You could probably run a Fortune 500 company by next week. Rosa smiled and looked down at the stack of cards in her hand. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know which opportunity she would choose or what path she would take. But for the first time in 3 years, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. And somewhere across the city, Vincent Caldwell sat alone in the back of his car, staring out the window at the passing lights. He had spent his whole life looking down on people. Tonight, one of those people had looked back, and he would never forget it. 2 weeks had passed since that unforgettable night at the Golden Terrace. Rosa sat at her small kitchen table, surrounded by business cards, job offer letters, and a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. She had read each letter at least 5 times. She had researched every company. She had made lists of pros and cons until her notebook was filled with scribbled notes and crossed-out thoughts. But deep down, she had already made her decision. She had known the moment Helen Park handed her that business card. Whitmore Partners, the company she had helped save 3 years ago without ever knowing the full impact of her work. The company that was now offering her a chance to start over, to reclaim the career she had given up for her family. The position was Director of Strategic Planning. The salary was more than she had ever earned before. And the opportunity was exactly what she had dreamed about during those long nights of carrying trays and forcing smiles. She picked up her phone and dialed Helen's number. I'm in, she said when Helen answered. When do I start? The excitement in Helen's voice was genuine. Monday. And Rosa, you're going to do incredible things here. I already know it. After she hung up, Rosa sat quietly for a moment, letting the reality sink in. Then, she did something she hadn't done in a very long time. She cried, not from sadness, not from exhaustion, but from relief, from joy, from the overwhelming feeling that after years of struggling, something had finally gone right. That evening, Rosa video called her brother. Daniel was in his final semester of medical school, just weeks away from becoming a doctor. When his face appeared on the screen, Rosa could see the dark circles under his eyes from endless studying, but his smile was bright and warm, just like always. "Hey, what's going on?" he asked. "You look different. Did something happen?" Rosa told him everything. The night at the restaurant, Vincent Caldwell's cruelty. The moment she decided to speak up, the applause, the business cards, and the job offer from Whitmore Partners. When she finished, Daniel was silent for a long moment. His eyes were glistening. "Rosa," he finally said, his voice thick with emotion, "you gave up everything for me. Your career, your dreams, your life. And you never once complained. You never once made me feel guilty. You just kept going, day after day, so I could have this chance. You're my brother," Rosa said simply. "There was never any other choice." Daniel shook his head. "Most people wouldn't have done what you did. Most people would have resented it. But you carried our whole family on your back. And you did it with grace." He paused, wiping his eyes. "I'm so proud of you. And I know Mom would be too." That last sentence hit Rosa right in the heart. She had thought about her mother so many times over the past 3 years, wondered if she was doing the right thing, wondered if her mother would approve of the choices she had made. Now, hearing her brother say those words, she finally felt at peace. "Just promise me one thing," Daniel said. "Anything. Promise me you'll take this opportunity and fly. No more holding back. No more putting yourself last. It's your turn now, Rosa. Go show the world who you really are. Go show the world who you really are." Rosa smiled through her tears. "I promise." The following Monday, Rosa walked into the Whitmore Partners headquarters for her first day of work. The building was tall and modern, with glass walls and polished floors that reflected the morning sunlight. It was a far cry from the cramped kitchen and narrow hallways of the Golden Terrace. She was greeted by Helen personally, who walked her through the office and introduced her to the team. People shook her hand warmly, and several mentioned that they had heard about what happened at the restaurant. Word had spread quickly through Manhattan's business circles, and Rosa had become something of a legend. "The woman who took down Vincent Caldwell with nothing but words and the truth," one colleague said with a grin. "I wish I could have seen his face." Rosa just smiled. She didn't want to be known only for that moment. She wanted to be known for the work she was about to do, and she did incredible work. Over the next few months, Rosa threw herself into her new role with passion and determination. She analyzed deals, developed strategies, and helped the company expand into new markets. Her insights were sharp, her recommendations were sound, and her ability to see what others missed quickly earned her a reputation as one of the most valuable minds in the firm. Within a year, she was promoted to Vice President of Strategy. Within 2 years, she was sitting on the executive board. But success didn't change who Rosa was at her core. She remained humble and kind. She remembered what it felt like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to be treated like nothing. And she made sure that everyone around her, from the senior executives to the cleaning staff, felt seen and respected. She also stayed in touch with her old colleagues at the Golden Terrace. Tommy had been promoted to floor supervisor after Rosa left, and he often texted her updates about the restaurant. Every few months, Rosa would stop by for dinner, always leaving a generous tip and a warm smile for the staff who had become like family during her hardest years. As for Vincent Caldwell, his life took a very different turn. The story of what happened that night spread far and wide. Business journalists picked it up. Social media amplified it. Within weeks, Vincent had gone from being a feared titan of industry to being a cautionary tale about arrogance and cruelty. His business partners began distancing themselves from him. Deals that were once guaranteed started falling through. The investors who used to hang on his every word suddenly had better things to do. Some said he tried to reinvent himself, to rebuild his reputation through charity work and public apologies. But the damage was done. People had seen who he really was when he thought no one important was watching. And they didn't forget. Rosa didn't take pleasure in his downfall. She wasn't the type to celebrate someone else's misery. But she did hope that maybe, somewhere in his failures, Vincent had learned something. That maybe he would finally understand that the way you treat people matters. That everyone deserves dignity, no matter what uniform they wear or what job they hold. On the 2-year anniversary of that fateful night, Rosa found herself standing on the balcony of her new apartment, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. The city sparkled with a million lights, full of stories and struggles and dreams just like hers. She thought about everything that had brought her to this moment, the sacrifices, the exhaustion, the nights when she wasn't sure she could keep going. And she thought about that one moment when she decided to stop being invisible, when she looked a powerful man in the eye and refused to be diminished. That single moment had changed everything. Her phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. It was a photo of him, in a white coat, standing in front of a hospital. The caption read, "First day, as a real doctor. Thank you for making this possible. I love you." Rosa smiled, her heart full. She had given up years of her life for the people she loved. And in the end, life had given her back more than she ever could have imagined. Not because she got lucky, not because someone handed her success on a silver platter, but because she never stopped believing she was worth more than the labels others tried to put on her. And when the moment came to prove it, she was ready. That was the lesson Rosa carried with her every single day. The lesson she would one day share with others who felt invisible, who felt small, who felt like they didn't matter. You matter. Your story matters. And sometimes, all it takes is one moment of courage to change your entire life.